One day, a food truck appeared in the park. It was run by an old gentleman selling a new kind of snack called Fee-ah-bie. Fee-ah-bie was a kind of meat with sweet chocolate frosting on it. At first, people thought that meat and chocolate did not go well together, and no one dared to try the new snack. One day, a kid decided to buy a piece of Fee-ah-bie from the old gentleman. After trying it, to his surprise, it was delicious. The kid started telling everybody how tasty Fee-ah-bie was, and soon, more kids were buying Fee-ah-bie and agreeing that it was one of the best snacks they had ever tried. Eventually, even the parents started to like it. In the afternoon, there would be long lines in front of the food truck. Parents brought their kids to the food truck to buy some delicious Fee-ah-bie. However, after a while, a rumor started spreading that Fee-ah-bie was actually made out of raccoon meat. Most people did not believe this rumor and thought that the owner of another food truck in the park had made it up. They believed that the owner of the other food truck was jealous that Fee-ah-bie was so popular while the donuts he sold were not. The owner of the other food truck was a 40-year-old man who became obsessed with discovering the secret recipe for Fee-ah-bie. One day, he managed to find the home address of the Fee-ah-bie seller. Under the cover of darkness, he snuck into the seller's house by breaking a small window on the side of the house. As he ventured deeper into the house, he suddenly came upon a closed door. Strange noises were emanating from behind it, piquing his curiosity. Without hesitation, he opened the door and entered the room. What he saw inside filled him with horror. Numerous cages of raccoons were crammed into the small room, all of them behaving strangely. The raccoons were scratching and running in circles in their cages, displaying an unnatural amount of energy for their species. Suddenly, the door behind him slammed shut, trapping him inside. He frantically tried to open it and escape, but it was locked tight. The donut seller was never found. It seemed as though he had disappeared without a trace. 2 weeks later, the old gentleman who sold Fee-ah-bie introduced a new flavor. Everyone tried it and loved the new taste. People continued to flock to the park to purchase the delectable snack, completely unaware that the donut truck had been missing for quite some time.
Gina is a huge fan of a famous magician, and she was thrilled to hear that he would be performing in her city. She quickly went online to purchase a ticket, but due to the magician's immense popularity, most seats had already been sold out. Despite this, Gina was still excited to get a seat, even if it meant being quite far away from the stage. On the day of the show, Gina arrived early at the stadium and discovered that her seat was number 3821, which was indeed far away from the main stage. Nevertheless, she was determined to enjoy the magic show, which was expected to last 6 hours, with 2 intermissions in between. As soon as the show began, the magician amazed the audience with his incredible tricks, and Gina was among those cheering and clapping. During the first intermission, while she waited for the second part of the show to begin, a man approached her and claimed that she was in his seat. Gina was taken aback, as she had been sitting in seat number 3821 for the first part of the show. The man showed her his ticket, which indeed had the same seat number on it. Gina checked her own ticket and was shocked to see that it was actually seat number 710. She couldn't understand how the seat number on her ticket had changed from 3821 to 710. Feeling embarrassed, she stood up and gave the man his seat back. As she made her way to seat number 710, she realized that it was much closer to the stage, giving her a clearer view of her idol magician. Despite the initial confusion, Gina felt grateful for the unexpected turn of events and was eager to enjoy the rest of the show. The second part of the show was just as spectacular as the first, with the famous magician performing more amazing magic tricks that left the audience in awe. As the second part of the show came to an end, it was time for the second intermission. Upon returning from the restroom, Gina was surprised to find someone sitting in her seat, number 710. She politely informed the person that he was in her seat, but to her surprise, the person produced a ticket with seat number 710 on it. Gina then checked her own ticket and was shocked to see that her seat number was 33. She couldn't understand how this could be possible and began to worry that something was amiss. Upon finding her new seat, number 33, Gina was thrilled to see that it was located right in front of the big stage. As the magician made his way onto the stage, Gina couldn't help but feel a surge of excitement. Suddenly, in a split second, she felt like the magician had winked at her. It dawned on her that her ticket number might be part of the magic performance. This realization filled her with even more excitement, and she eagerly anticipated what was to come next. As the magician began to select a fan from the audience to come up on stage, Gina eagerly raised her hand, along with many others. To her surprise, the magician turned to her and chose her. Gina felt an overwhelming sense of excitement as she made her way up to the stage. Once there, the magician asked her to take out her ticket and show everyone her seat number. She did as instructed, displaying the number 33 to the audience and the camera. The magician then requested that Gina place her ticket face down on a small table on the stage. After performing a hand gesture, the magician instructed Gina to pick up the ticket and show everyone the seat number again. To her amazement, the seat number had transformed from seat 33 to seat on stage. The crowd erupted in applause as the magician gestured for Gina to turn around. Suddenly, a chair appeared on stage, and the magician invited her to sit down. Trembling with excitement, Gina took a seat. The magician then produced a curtain and placed it around Gina's chair, blocking her from view. After a brief countdown, the curtain fell, and Gina had vanished from the chair. The audience roared with applause and cheers, amazed by the magician's stunning trick. Unknown to the audience, Gina actually disappeared and was never found. She woke up in a dark, small room with no doors and solid walls. No matter how hard Gina yelled or pounded on the walls, no one heard her. There was only one thing in the room, a chair in the center of the room. Gina reached into her pocket and found a ticket. When she took it out and checked, she was shocked to see that the seat number on the ticket was now -15. Was she somewhere underground? Where was Gina? The mystery continued to baffle everyone. The police searched for her, but no clues were found. The magician denied any involvement and said he had no idea what happened to Gina. The audience who witnessed Gina's disappearance were left with mixed emotions of awe, confusion, and concern. The show became a topic of discussion on social media and news outlets. Some speculated that it was part of an elaborate magic trick, while others believed it was a genuine abduction. Whatever the case may be, Gina's disappearance remained a mystery that haunted the minds of many for years to come.
It was a gloomy night, and John was home alone. He had just started playing his favorite horror game, The Nightmare Chronicles, and was completely immersed in the eerie atmosphere. As he progressed through the game, he noticed that it was getting colder in his room, but he brushed it off as just his imagination. As the clock struck midnight, John received a call on his gaming headset. When he answered, there was no response, only dead silence. Thinking it was just a prank call, he tried to hang up, but the call wouldn't disconnect. Suddenly, the screen of the game flickered, and a new level appeared that John had never seen before. It was dark and desolate, with no signs of life. The only sound was the wind howling in the background, and the eerie silence was making John uneasy. As he progressed through the level, he noticed that his character was getting colder and colder. He could see his breath, and his hands were shaking. Suddenly, the game froze, and John's headset started making strange noises. That's when he noticed something in the corner of his eye. It was a shadowy figure, standing just outside his window. John tried to get up and turn on the lights, but he couldn't move. The figure started moving closer and closer, and John could feel its icy breath on his neck. Just then, the game resumed, and John's character was face to face with the same shadowy figure. The figure started speaking to him, but its voice was distorted and demonic. John tried to turn off the game, but it wouldn't respond. The figure spoke again. "You can't escape from me, John. I've been watching you, and now I'm going to take your soul." John tried to run, but his character was frozen in place. The figure's icy grip tightened around him, and suddenly, the game crashed. John was left alone in his cold, dark room, shaken to his core. From that day on, John never played The Nightmare Chronicles again. The game had shown him something that he was not supposed to see, and the call with no one talking had confirmed that something was watching him. John realized that sometimes, it's best to leave some things alone and not to play with the unknown.
Katie had been waiting for months to see her favorite singer perform live. As she stood in the crowd, swaying to the music, she felt a sudden jolt of excitement when she caught the singer's eye. At first, she felt thrilled that he seemed to be locking his gaze on her, singing directly to her. But as the concert went on, Katie's excitement turned to unease. She couldn't shake the feeling that the singer's gaze was following her every move, and when she looked up at the stage, she could see a sinister smirk on his face. As the concert came to a close, Katie made her way out of the arena, hoping to leave the creepy feeling behind. But as she walked down the street, she felt like she was being followed. She turned around but saw nothing but empty streets. The feeling persisted, growing stronger and more ominous with each passing moment. And then she saw him, the singer, standing at the end of the street, staring at her with a malevolent grin on his face. Katie quickened her pace, her heart pounding as she tried to put as much distance as possible between her and the singer. But the feeling of being followed only intensified. She could hear footsteps behind her, growing closer and closer with each passing moment. Finally, she reached her apartment building and frantically fumbled with the keys, trying to unlock the door as quickly as possible. But just as she was about to open it, a hand reached out and grabbed her shoulder, spinning her around. It was the singer, his eyes now dark and menacing. With a sinister smile, he whispered in her ear, "I've been waiting for you, Katie." Katie screamed and tried to break free, but the singer's grip was too strong. As he dragged her away, she realized that she had made a grave mistake by ever letting him catch her eye at the concert. Now, she was at the mercy of his twisted desires, with no hope of escape. Katie was never found. A month later, the singer released a new album titled, "I Have Abducted Her."
Tom had been driving for hours and was in desperate need of a place to rest. As he drove down the desolate highway, he spotted a rundown hotel in the distance. Desperate for shelter, he pulled into the parking lot and headed inside. The lobby was dark and deserted, with a flickering TV providing the only source of light. As he approached the front desk, he noticed a strange sound coming from behind him, the ice maker machine. It was churning out ice, even though there didn't seem to be anyone around to use it. Feeling uneasy, Tom grabbed his room key and headed up to his room. The hallway was dimly lit, and the walls were peeling, adding to the eerie atmosphere of the hotel. When he reached his room, he fumbled with the key and finally managed to open the door. As he stepped inside, he noticed that the room was freezing cold. He went over to the heater, but it was broken, so he decided to turn on the TV to try and distract himself from the cold. But as he settled onto the bed and started to watch the flickering images on the screen, strange things began to happen. The TV started to glitch and flicker, showing distorted images that made Tom feel nauseous. And every time he turned his head, he thought he could see something moving out of the corner of his eye. As the night wore on, Tom started to feel more and more uneasy. The ice maker machine continued to churn out ice, even though he hadn't seen anyone else in the hotel. And the TV became more and more distorted, showing images of people he didn't recognize, with twisted and contorted faces. Suddenly, he heard a knock at the door. His heart racing, he cautiously approached the door and peered through the peephole. But there was no one there, only the dimly lit hallway. Shaken, Tom tried to calm himself down and went back to bed. But as he lay there, he could feel a presence in the room with him, as if someone or something was watching him. In the end, Tom couldn't take it anymore. He packed his bags and fled the hotel, leaving the ice maker machine, the flickering TV, and the cold, rundown room behind. But he couldn't shake the feeling that something had been following him ever since he left, haunting him wherever he went.
It was a typical night at the office, and Sarah had decided to stay late to catch up on some work. As she sat at her desk, typing away, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. She felt like she was being watched. Suddenly, she heard a strange noise coming from down the hallway. It sounded like a faint, muffled laugh. She tried to ignore it, chalking it up to her imagination, but the sound grew louder and more distinct with each passing moment. As she got up to investigate, she realized that the office was not as empty as she thought it was. In the shadows, she caught a glimpse of something that made her heart race: a clown. The clown stood motionless, staring at her with its beady, unblinking eyes. Sarah tried to call out, but her voice was hoarse, barely audible above the sound of her own heartbeat. The clown continued to stare at her, its expression unreadable. Suddenly, the lights flickered and went out, plunging the office into darkness. Sarah stumbled back to her desk, fumbling for her phone to use as a flashlight. As she shone the light around the room, she could feel the presence of the clown lurking just beyond the reach of the light. Terrified, she began to run, her footsteps echoing through the empty halls as she tried to find a way out. But the more she ran, the more lost she became, as if the office itself was conspiring to keep her trapped. As she stumbled through the darkness, she could hear the faint sound of the clown's laughter behind her. It echoed through the halls, growing louder and more menacing with each passing moment. With a scream, Sarah turned a corner and came face to face with the clown. Its expression was twisted into a sinister grin, and its eyes glowed with an otherworldly light. With no other option, Sarah turned and ran, her heart pounding as she fled the office. She never went back there again, but she could still hear the faint sound of the clown's laughter, echoing through the halls and haunting her nightmares.
The building had always been there, towering over the city's skyline like a monolith of concrete and glass. It was a place of business, with dozens of floors filled with offices, cubicles, and boardrooms. But there was a secret to the building, one that few knew about. Deep beneath the ground, hidden from sight, there was a floor that no one talked about. It was an abandoned floor, one that had been sealed off for years, with no access from the rest of the building. And yet there were stories. Stories of people who had accidentally taken the elevator up to that floor and had never returned. They would step into the elevator, press the button for their desired floor, but then something would happen. The elevator would shake, or the lights would flicker, or the doors would open to reveal a dark, empty corridor. And then they would be gone. No one knew where they went, or what happened to them. They simply vanished, leaving no trace behind. Most people dismiss the stories as urban legends, nothing more than tall tales spun to scare children. But there were others who believed. Others who had seen things, or heard whispers in the dark. They knew that there was something on that secret floor, something dark and sinister, that was waiting for its next victim. And then, one day, it happened. A young woman, fresh out of college and eager to make a name for herself, stepped into the elevator on the ground floor. She was headed to the 20th floor, where her new job awaited her. But something went wrong. The elevator shook, and the lights flickered. And when the doors opened, she found herself on the secret floor. She tried to turn back, to run back into the elevator and escape. But it was too late. Something reached out from the shadows, and she was gone. The police investigated, but they found nothing. No signs of a struggle, no clues as to where the woman had gone. It was as if she had simply vanished into thin air. And so the stories continued, whispered in hushed tones by those who knew the truth. The secret floor was still there, waiting for its next victim. Waiting for someone to accidentally step into the elevator and take that fateful ride to oblivion. It was a beautiful day for camping. The sun was shining and there was a light breeze blowing through the trees. The campers set up their tents and started exploring the woods around them. As they hiked deeper into the forest, the wind began to pick up. It was nothing too unusual, just a bit of rustling in the leaves, but it made the campers feel a little uneasy. As the day wore on, the wind grew stronger. It started to whistle through the trees, making it difficult to hear anything else. The campers joked about it, saying they were glad they weren't in a tent that would be flapping around all night. As night fell, the wind grew even stronger. The trees creaked and groaned, and the sound was almost deafening. The campers huddled together around the fire, roasting marshmallows and telling ghost stories. And then they heard it. A sound like a scream, carried on the wind from deep within the woods. The campers exchanged nervous glances, but they tried to tell themselves it was just an animal, or maybe a trick of the wind. But the wind didn't stop. It kept howling through the trees, and the scream came again, louder this time, closer. The campers were starting to get scared. And then they saw it. A figure looming up out of the mist like a ghost. It was tall and thin, with long, bony fingers and eyes that glowed in the darkness. The campers froze in terror, unsure of what to do. The figure seemed to be beckoning them deeper into the woods, its skeletal fingers curling in a silent invitation. They tried to run, but the wind was too strong. It pushed them back, making it almost impossible to move. The figure grew closer, and they could see now that it was not human at all, but some kind of creature, with skin as white as bone and eyes that burned like fire. The campers were trapped, with the creature closing in. They could hear its growls now, low and menacing, and the scraping of its claws on the ground. And then, just when all hope seemed lost, the wind died down, and the rain stopped. The creature vanished into the mist, and the campers were able to escape. They never forgot that night, and the terror that had stalked them through the woods. They never returned to that campsite, and they never spoke of it again. But they knew that somewhere, deep in the heart of the forest, the creature still waited, biding its time, waiting for the wind to bring new victims to its lair.